Right. I think someone's going to tell me any minute now in the live chat that I am in fact live. It says I am, so I'm going to trust the technology. I don't know. Right. For anybody who's not been on the planet for the last, I don't know, like decade or something, to my, well, in front of me, but to my right on the screen, no, to my
No,
left.
to your left.
Somewhere on the screen alongside me is
to my right.
Okay, right. After we do the line dancing that we've obviously planned for, the person who's not me is Robert Spencer. I think we're safe to go with that. He's an author of a ridiculous number of books, 21. If anybody,
but no ridiculous books. Well,
none whatsoever.
Some people's opinions will differ on that.
But some people are what we like to call retards, and by we I mean me, obviously, for purposes of like correct speech. Anywho, 21 books, the latest of which we sort of briefly touched upon with Jay Smith before, but I'd like to kind of go into it a little more. What else? Like, Jihad Watch. How to forget? Islamicize Me, all sorts of hijinks and so not too rigidly serious all the time, but it is a pretty heavy subject to be involved in. So welcome, Robert. I got there eventually. The intro takes longer
yes.
than the questions. So yeah, anybody who does have a question that is decent, I don't mean the person, I mean, well, both, hopefully, but the question, please do shove it in with capital letters question. I may see it scoot by, otherwise just keep copy pasting it. I'm not checking my phone at the moment for text messages. I'm looking for my list of stuff that I'm going to speak about. So, right, let me take a breath. Okay, with regards to Did Mohammed Exist, which is the book handily and also the topic, have you always suspected that he was some kind of fabrication? I'm going to get on to what kind, but is it something that you've always held, or was there some like eureka moment where you thought, it's all twaddle? I mean, yeah, he's all twaddle. Okay, and what was that? Like, what led up to that for you?
Well, I started out assuming that Muhammad existed because it's taken for granted everywhere in the world. And so when I took college courses on Islam, they spoke about Muhammad as a historical figure. They gave us birth and death dates and location of his activities and so on. And no hint whatsoever that all of this was based on material that is a couple hundred years after he's supposed to have died. So it wasn't until later, much later, in 2006, I wrote a book called The Truth About Muhammad, the founder of the world's most intolerant religion. It's a biography of Muhammad based on Ibn Ishaq, the earliest biographer of Muhammad. The biographical material about Muhammad in the canonical Hadith collections. Hadith is reports of Muhammad's words and deeds, primarily Bukhari and Muslim, the ones that Muslims believe are most reliable, and Ibn Sa'd, a few other biographers of Muhammad. And I noticed at that time that none of this material was earlier than 130, 140 years after Muhammad's life. And it was impossible to find anything earlier. There isn't anything earlier. So I put a caveat in that book that this is a biography of Muhammad based on how he is depicted in Islamic texts. But the historical value of this material is highly questionable. And I always wanted to come back to that. In 2011, I finally got a chance, 2010 or 11, it all runs together now. That was Did Muhammad Exist, the first edition. Now coming in July is a revised and expanded version of Did Muhammad Exist. I got a chance to revisit this issue to look at the historical data in depth. And the more you look, the less there is to see. The more you look at early Islam, the less Islam there is. And there's no Muhammad.
Those halcyon days.
Yes.
There was a time. So, Okay, so you've taken your previous work on it, expanded upon it, kind of revised potentially in light of developments within that decade or so,
Yes.
and also the preceding 1400 years, I assume. What do you postulate is the truth of the matter? Do you have like a multi-scenario potentials, or do you like hone in on? I mean, for me, just off the top of my head, the alternative is either there was a completely other one person who morphed into Mohammed. There was an amalgamation of different, like pretty dubious dudes, as it were, into one guy, or it's a literal fairy story, like was just penned, you know, as a, I don't know, like a PR move, was of some like a solidifying or unifying concept of the best example, although they're a bit shady on where these best examples might be found. So what do you favor as an, or is there a new, like a different explanation of what, who is, where did he come from? And when I say he, I mean the idea of him.
There are a lot of different theories on this, and what we do know, based on the existing material, is that Islam, and particularly the Quran, were fashioned from existing material, some of it Jewish, some of it Christian, some of it Zoroastrian, and amalgamated together in order to create this new religion, apparently with the motive to provide a unifying force for their new empire, the Arab Empire, because in those days religion is what unified empires. And so the Byzantine Empire was Christian, the Persian Empire was Zoroastrian. Those were the two great powers of the day. The Arabs came in and conquered all this huge expanse of land, and then they fashioned a religion out of it. Now, Jay Smith has done some groundbreaking research recently, our mutual friend, on one individual, Iyad ibn Qabisa, who he says has quite a lot of parallels to the life of Muhammad as it is depicted. And he contends on that basis that the basics of the life of Muhammad were essentially incorporated into the Muhammad legend from the life of this fellow. And that may well be, but at the same time, it's also clear that a number of sources went into this mythical creation. And a lot of them are contradictory, because once Muhammad was invented and began to be referred to as the prophet of the religion, then there was an immense proliferation of forged material by Muslims, who would, Muslims of one group would make up a story about Muhammad to justify their doing things one way. And then Muslims of the rival group would make up another story about Muhammad to justify their doing things in a different way. So you have...
Yeah, sorry.
Very briefly to sum up, so you have Muhammad saying, don't kill women and children, and you also have Muhammad saying that if you're, when he was asked about bombarding a place that was full of women and children, he said, they are of them. They're all of the same polytheists, so it's all right. This is just a flat contradiction that can only be explained by the fact that these two stories about Muhammad were invented by rival groups. And so there's a lot of that. That makes me think it's not just one single person who became Muhammad, but rather a lot of existing material that got mixed up together in this.
I think that I can see a definite correlation with like authentic history, as it were. The you know, the Roman Empire being Christianized was potentially in order to unify it, because everybody was worshipping different gods on different days and had different priorities, whereas one God who you would be willing to die for, as it were, was preferable, even if, you know, it's debatable whether the emperor was a genuine convert or whether it was like a machination just to unify. But that did happen historically, so that lends credence, I guess, to wanting a monotheistic religion to unify a region and then smash the life out of everyone around you, kind of thing, and conquer lands and such. I think I haven't really looked into it too much, because it doesn't matter to me either way. I know that people who follow that religion are still just as in trouble if he was a real guy or not. I think between you and Jay, you're tackling the book, the man, the everything surrounding it. So the rest of us just basically get to smoke a quick ciggy and kind of try and catch up and argue with people. But I think just if he is the result of like a figurehead being copy pasted with all these different outlying groups and their desires, I mean, it just shows what a bunch of rascals were around in those days, because none of them seem to have got the hang of this best example business, because I don't know where they got that moniker from or why they felt it important, other than a reflection of Christianity. And you mentioned the various books. If they were drawing from the apocryphal or the like infancy gospels and the Jewish text and the genuine Christian text and the Zoroastrian, couldn't they find anything nice? I mean, were they just looking for horror stories maybe to frighten people into submission, or because they did have swords as well? So
that's part of it. One of the things that they were trying to do is strengthen their empire. If you have a bunch of people who are generals, warlords, and they are fashioning a religion in order to strengthen their own empire, then they're going to make it into a warlike, aggressive, violent, and supremacist religion, because then those values will be inculcated into the population, and the people will fight in order to preserve and expand the empire, which is what the people who run the empire want. So they wanted it to be martial and aggressive and violent, and that's what they made it.
Were there any, this is a genuine question that I have no idea. I know that keeping records of things was like in effect long before Islam turned up for the Jews and the Christians, and probably the pagans. They had to keep a check on how many idols they had and who was worshipping who. But is there any contemporary accounts of the reaction to either the 200-year-old Islam or are there any surviving accounts of what people made of this sort of destruction and threats and intimidation and Johnny come latelys riding around, demanding that God be worshipped? And do they factor into your evidences for the non-existence of does anyone mention a guy like a figurehead or is it just, I mean, potentially the companions could have all been amalgam. I don't know how.
Yeah, I think the companions are largely made up as well, or incorporated from the followers of other people, like the J. Smith's friend Jihad. The thing about Muhammad is the yawning absence of any mention of him. There is plenty of record of how people reacted to the conquests, and plenty of record of non-Muslims saying the invaders came out of Arabia and they burned the churches or the Hindu temples or whatever, and they put themselves in charge and they brutalized people and so on. There's a lot of that in the 7th century, a great deal of record of it. And this is one of the reasons why people doubt Muhammad's existence, because in all that material, there isn't any mention for 60 years after the conquest started of a Muhammad or a new religion or a new holy book. So the idea of the people being energized by Muhammad's words and then going out and invading and conquering, and then the people who they conquer say, why are you doing this? And they never mention the motivating factor for it. It's very hard to believe.
Yeah,
so
it's almost as if it's all nonsense, Robert.
Well, yeah, but you don't have, in the time that it's supposed to have happened, and in the immediate aftermath of it, you just don't have any record of Muhammad. You have a couple of mentions of the name, but even they may be a title more than a name, because it was not a name before the Prophet of Islam. But it is a title, the one who is being praised, the praised one. Yeah. So in light of that, you have but you don't have anything of the biographical material that comes later. So in light of that, you cannot assume that there was this Muhammad and this Quran laying around and nobody ever talked about them and nobody ever mentioned them. It would be the most extraordinary omission in history.
Yeah. So it would be feasible to think that potentially when Uthman standardized, he may have destroyed like Islamic accounts of Muhammad for sure, because he went on a bit of a power trip, but that wouldn't explain the absence of what, it's not extra Islamic, or I don't know what the word is, but outside of Islam, those accounts that have survived about the, you know, the robberies and the persecutions and stuff, but not of this guy. So, okay, that's something to ponder for a long time. I mean, you've had like a 10-year run up, so I'll just take my time.
Well, I
with
don't
it.
believe in Uthman either. The
Okay.
first one we have any
You're gonna tell me next you don't believe in Allah. Come on now, don't
The first one that we have any actual historical record of, contemporary historical record of, is Muawiyah, who is the caliph starting in 661.
Okay.
And that's after the rightly guided caliphs. He's the first not rightly guided caliph.
The wrongly guided.
Yeah, exactly. You have Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and those are the four rightly guided caliphs from 632 to 661. But there's no historical record that any of them existed. And there are a lot of funny things about this. For example, Uthman, as you noted, is supposed to have collected the Quran. He's supposed to have, in the year 656, he called together all the people who had copies of the Quran or who had parts of it memorized, and he standardized the text and burned the variants and distributed the copies to all the Muslim provinces. That is the story.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of problems with it. In the first place, there's still no mention of the Quran for another 40 years. Mm. So if it was distributed to the provinces in 656, why does nobody get around to quoting it or mentioning it until 691, 35 years? Why? Where was it? Why wouldn't that, even if it was just being quoted, there would have been somebody mentioning it, one can assume. When they're talking to the non-Muslims who are asking them why did they do this, you would expect, like they say today, you read the ISIS literature and Al-Qaeda, everything, all the jihad groups, they're quoting Quran left and right. Yeah. You would expect that the jihadis of that time would...
Allah knows best. I mean, you would just, like, just for any awkward questions or...
But you would expect them to be saying, the Quran told us to do this, and there isn't any. And also, there's one other thing I got to tell you before, and then I'll be quiet.
No.
Uthman is supposed to have collected the Quran in 656. Now, there's another story about Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik was the caliph from 685 to 705, and it's during his caliphate that you start actually hearing about Islam and Muhammad and the Quran. And there is a tradition of Abdul Malik saying, I'm afraid I'm going to die during Ramadan because I was born during Ramadan, I became caliph during Ramadan, and I collected the Quran during Ramadan. So I'm afraid I'm going to die during Ramadan. Now, you see, people will just, the ordinary reaction to that is people will say, well, that's a false tradition, because Uthman had already collected the Quran 40 years before. But my question is, okay, but if that were true, why was that tradition invented? Who decided to make up a story about Abdul Malik collecting the Quran? It makes much more sense if Abdul Malik collected the Quran and said it was Uthman to give it an air of authenticity.
Yeah. The thing is, once something's been sent out into the provinces, it's similar to biblical accusations, I guess, when they say things like, oh yeah, but that wasn't inserted into until the 4th century. And you're like, do you mean somebody went door to door around the empire and literally inserted it into, I mean, it's not a website. It's not like someone can just order it in the night. So once a written Quran has been sent out, whether or not, I mean, that's post alleged, I don't know what to call him now, it's post the standardization, so therefore they would still be in existence. Someone would have hidden one anyway. If it was such a valuable thing to have, the explicit word of God, someone would be laying down their life and at least putting it behind the sofa, or I don't know, hiding it away.
That's another thing too. There are different stories of how the Quran was collected. In Islamic tradition, tradition says that Uthman collected it, but it also says that Abu Bakr, who was the first caliph after Muhammad, that he collected it. And then when Uthman came along, it's as if it never happened. So where's Abu Bakr's Quran? Why didn't anybody come up and say, hey, we did this, here it is. We've been sitting on this for 25 years, but now that you asked, here it is.
Yeah, get those goats out of the room. That sort of thing. The thing is, so let me just double check. There are no records or no convincing records or accounts of the companions, say, and that by default Aisha as well, I guess, because of Abu Bakr, like that. But in terms of, I mean, Khadija was kind of the daughter of the Bill Gates of Arabia, like kind of thing. She was pretty a big deal, as it were. Are there, I mean, I don't know much about Arabian like financing or accounting of the time, but I know that the Jews were fastidious. If anyone borrowed someone a tomb or planted a tree in someone else's orchard, like if there was an account of it written down. So surely if this very rich merchant or whatever he was had a daughter, she decided to marry some oik, like wouldn't there be something on the animal skins or on the palm? I don't know, like there would be records of the marriage or the
I don't know if there would be. I don't know. There may be marriage records from 7th century Arabia. I don't know. That's something I have never looked into, but I can tell you one thing. Another reason why people doubt that Muhammad existed is because of Mecca. You read the canonical accounts in the earliest Islamic sources about Muhammad's life. He's born in Mecca. He becomes a prophet right outside Mecca on Mount Hira. He then moves to Medina. At the end of his life, he conquers Mecca, comes back to Mecca, and dies there. So the Kaaba is in Mecca, the Great Mosque is in Mecca, the tomb of Muhammad, and it's very centered on Mecca. Mecca is supposed to be...
Except Petra. Yeah.
Well, this is the problem, that Mecca is supposed to be the center of all this, and it's supposed to have been a great trade center. And Khadija was a trader, a merchant, and Muhammad worked for her. But we do have records of the merchants, the traveling salesmen, because they would keep their notes and say where they sold this and where they sold that and keep their itinerary so they would know where to go and where they could expect to make sales. And so we actually have records of that from the 7th century, and they didn't go to Mecca.
Yeah.
They bypass, Mecca is actually in Southwest Arabia, and you would have to go down through all this trackless desert waste to get there from Syria, which is very unlikely for merchants to have done. It's much more likely that if they're coming from Europe or going to Europe, that they cross through Syria into Iraq and Iran and into India. So there's no Mecca, then there's no Muhammad in Mecca, and all those stories are clearly false.
Yeah. So we've got geographical discrepancies, definite like historical record discrepancies or absences, more to the point. Another reason he potentially didn't exist, even within Islamic sources, his father was long dead before his mother should have been pregnant even. So that kind of goes towards, you don't exist if your dad died like 5 years before you were, but that's generally anyone with any math skills or like biology knowledge. That's a bit of a weird one. But okay, so now let me kind of move away from this, because whether or not he existed, Jihad definitely exists Sharia in its various guises and like true sense definitely exists. And if, as you say, it's all being drawn from a sunnah and accounts that are just basically kind of made up to suit the prevailing wind, which is quite disgusting in places. Has there ever been a time, I mean, maybe post-Crusade? Oh, no, actually, from the wherever the birth and whenever the birth of Islam was, when it was a unified, conquering theology or political ideology, whatever it was, has there ever been a time where they've all gone off for a football match? Like, is it lately because I'm choosing to spotlight persecution, maybe? Has it all gone really busy, or is that just my perspective and it's always been like that and we've never known?
No, it's there are times when it hasn't been as bad.
Mm-hmm.
You look at well, speaking strictly for myself, when I was young, we didn't hear about people blowing themselves up or going on stabbing sprees in the middle of London or Paris. This is completely new. And of course, a lot of it is because of mass migration, but a lot of it is also because the jihad is much more active today than it was 50 years ago. This is because, in the first place, the Saudis struck oil and started to finance jihad indoctrination around the world. They also took advantage of modern communications. That it used to be, if you were in Karachi or Dhaka and they weren't preaching jihad right around you, then you might not ever hear about it. But nowadays you can go online and there it is. And so these kinds of things have led to a resurgence. Also, the victory of the Iranian revolutionaries and the establishment of the Islamic Republic, which showed, as far as jihadis were concerned around the world, that the non-Muslim powers were weak and able to be conquered. So you have various factors making it more virulent today. There's also, if you look back through Islamic history, and I could mention my book, The History of Jihad, you have a pendulum swinging back and forth in a certain sense, that Islamic law is just as inhumane for Muslims as it is for non-Muslims. So in many cases in history, you have people saying that they don't want to live under it and relaxing it, or not saying this because that'll get you killed, but just relaxing the provisions of Islamic law and living in a more generous and relaxed fashion. And then something bad happens in the society, as will always be the case, and the preachers say it's because we turned away from Allah, and they redouble their efforts, and there's an Islamic revival, and the rigorism starts again. So it swings back and forth. Right now, it's actually happening in both ways. In Iran, they're thoroughly sick of the Islamic Republic and to a great degree of Islam itself. And the pendulum is slowly swinging back toward the secularism they rejected in 1979. And I would expect that, although now the Biden administration is going to prop them up again, if it hadn't done that, the Islamic Republic could have fallen in the next year or so. Now it probably will stay for a while, but it can't last forever. And meanwhile, in the other direction, you have the Islamization of Turkey, which used to be secular and now is becoming more and more tied to Sharia and exporting Sharia as well.
I noticed it doesn't seem to get, I mean, you'll be an exception, but it doesn't seem to get any airtime whatsoever. But I think Sweden, I don't know if it was the week before January, I think. I'm going to get my dates mixed up, but within the last 2 months, a church was firebombed, the same church twice within 4 days. If anybody just puts in desecration of churches France and then hits the image search, it's just what it's something like, I mean, 3 years ago, I think it was 2+. So on average, between 2 and 3 churches per day, every day, all year round, being desecrated, attacked, feces smeared on the walls in the shapes of crosses. Like, quite imaginative desecration, apart from the boring old firebombs and the smashing up the icons and tearing down the crosses. And I wonder, I don't know, is there evidence of, I know in the Quran there's mixed feelings, shall we say, about Christians. There's the I'm a little bit weak, can you be my friend kind of version. And then there's the, well, tough luck, now I'm in charge bit. But I mean, is that a long running thing? Are there trends in jihad? Like, are there, I know, you know, you can't chop everybody's head off when you want to, but yeah, is church desecration a newish phenomena, or is it, I don't know, is there a memo going around? Like, what's going on with the church? I know under dimitude, you can't repair your churches, but these are churches in France, which I think what you said about the migrant population is definitely correlative and causative. I think there's stats on that are pretty, unless you're very left wing, they're obvious. You just have to look at them with your eyes. But yeah, is that a newish thing? Like, what did a church ever do to anybody? Apart from make you cold.
Make you what?
Cold and potentially bored when you're young. But
oh dear. Well, I can tell you,
yeah.
The churches have always been desecrated throughout history. There are in the history of jihad abundant accounts of Muslims either destroying churches or synagogues or Hindu temples or converting them to mosques. The most notable examples, of course, are the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, built on the site of the Jewish temple. The Jewish temple, of course, had been destroyed many centuries previous to the conquest, but those mosques were built there to make sure it wouldn't be rebuilt and to declare the supremacy of Islam. The Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, at one point the grandest church in the Christian world, converted to a mosque on May 29th, 1453. Thousands of Hindu temples. There are records of many of them in the history of jihad. Terrible stories about the places being obliterated, destroyed, and the gods broken up and the pieces put in front of the mosque so that the Muslims would be trampling the Hindu gods and so on. Deliberate, calculated insult to show the supremacy of Islam. The kind of desecration that we see in France nowadays is a little bit different because the circumstances are different, but the intent is ultimately the same: to show contempt for the non-Muslim religion, to strike terror in the hearts of the enemies of Allah, as the Quran says in chapter 8, verse 60, to show that Islam is present and superior, and to frighten the non-Muslims, which makes them more likely to submit.
Yeah, it really does illustrate the, I don't want to swear, I can't think of the polite, yeah, the not the backward nature, but the just inverse logic and theological approach. I mean, humans don't often get it completely right if they've got a ill-informed text to go by, but to literally war against the flesh of other people, it doesn't make any sense, because if Allah is gathering converts by means of anything other than genuine, heartfelt acceptance of his will or recognition of his greatness, or I don't know, whatever he fancies really, but if you're just forcing people into it, there's no glory given to any real God, like the real God, by that. It's not a conversion. If you don't really believe it in your heart, then you're just a statistic. And do you know what I mean? It's a bit,
yeah, but you're thinking like a Christian.
I know it's a problem. It is a problem.
Well, in all seriousness, this is a very big problem that we have in the West, that in general, people, even though Christianity is much less influential in the West than it used to be, it is still in the mindset of people who are atheists, people who hate Christianity. They still think to a tremendous degree like Christians in ways they don't even realize. And one of them is that the people tend to think that religions are all about magnanimity and brotherhood and peace. And all religions, they assume that all religions are like Christianity. Or they assume that if you're religious, then you're going to be gentle and sweet and kind to everybody, because they can't conceive of a religion that actually has violence against other people as a holy act that the God will bless. But that's what Islam is. It's kind of the embodiment of Jesus saying the time will come when men will kill you and think they're offering service to God. That's Islam. The men kill you and they think they're being holy and righteous when they do it.
The thing is, they think they're offering service to God, but at the same time, the apologists for them are now quite comfortable saying, oh, actually, it's not your God. It's my, like, that facade all kind of, I don't know, it just crumbled all of a sudden. It used to meet such resistance if you pointed out that Yahweh is not Allah, because there's just multitudes of reasons why he can't be. Like, well, Allah can't be Yahweh, but now it's just kind of casually accepted. But at the same time, yeah, it's very odd. It's very perplexing. There will be an answer. I will find it. I just haven't got time because I'm trying to sort out Nigeria with the persecution. Right. And that is what that's what I wanted to kind of ask, really. So the rigidity, even though there was, I don't know, like, I don't want to say reformation, but Wahhabism, and there have been moves. They've never really been progressive in a positive sense. They've been regressive, but they've been like ebbs and flows of, like you say with Iran, like more strict adherence, and then everybody realizes, hold on a minute, this is unworkable. We have to have some like fluidity of society and stuff like that. How do you suppose that this cult, I guess, of wokeness and progressivism and subjective morality and all, like, how does that come up against something so rigid? Even in its relaxed state, Sharia is pretty like lethal, literally, to most people apart from the judge. How do they seem to, why I mean, I get it if you want to defend everybody and everybody's equally able to yeah, but those same people are pretty casual about disparaging Christianity and mocking, and, you know, like, do you have any theories as to how, is it just subversion, like on the part of Islam, to these sort of well-wishers, or I don't know what you'd call them, do-gooders?
Do you mean why do leftists defend Islam? Is that what you're asking?
That's exactly what I mean, but I'm quite verbose. Why use only 4 words when you can? Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Yes, please.
I think they both hate the same things. They both hate Judeo-Christian tradition. They both hate the West. The jihadis, right from the beginning of Islam, have tried to conquer Europe. And so if you have a force that hates what you hate, then you know the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I think they've made common cause on that basis, and also on the fact that they are both authoritarian and violent. The left falsely claims that there's some big problem with right-wing extremists and so on. And that's a lot of hooey. Of course, it's a smokescreen to cover for the fact that the left itself is increasingly violent. You can see the riots that Antifa and Black Lives Matter are pursuing on a dispiritingly regular basis, and calling openly for violence against the people they hate, as well as calling openly for them to be shut down. Just the other day, I was on a show with called Truth in Politics, and just hours before the show was supposed to go on, the Truth in Politics YouTube channel was closed, was shut, banned by YouTube. And this is just, of course, one example of hundreds or thousands of the leftist oligarchs who control the social media outlets, closing them off to people who dissent from the leftist agenda. And so the left has always been, and is today, violent and authoritarian. Islam, Sharia, is violent and authoritarian. You get out of line and they'll cut your hand off or cut your head off or whatever. And it's the same kind of thing, you see, that both of them are trying to establish a perfect society. That, after all, is the goal of communism, right? The classless society, the dictatorship of the proletariat, in which everybody will be equal and justice will prevail. And we have to get there by putting people in camps and killing them. And the Sharia is the same way. It's the perfect society of Allah, and we enforce it by chopping heads when necessary. So they see each other, I think, as deep ideological, spiritual kin.
Yeah. I've got a theory as to why it seemed, I mean, Christ, a part of the theory is that Christ said so, so therefore it's true. He said, you'll be hated, you'll be persecuted, expect this to happen. But I think that potentially, like you say, utopian, whether or not they're truly utopian, but utopian projections, it will be like this if only. Jannah will be like this if only you suffer in this world. And I don't know, some Marxist revolution will bring you to a place where so these, I want to say absolute twaddle scenarios, it's not really an American word, this nonsense stuff, this BS, whatever, is put out there. And because Christianity is the truth anyway, but because we're pretty sensible when it comes to the actual truth, as in subjective and objective truth, Christians have to say, oh, no, that's not going to work. No, it's not going to be like that. And no, you can't. This is kindergarten, imaginings. And therefore we get backlash from, like I said to you off camera, what did anybody expect the Pope to say when he's asked if he'll bless two people who are openly admitting they're performing an act in the privacy of their own homes? Granted, that is explicitly heavily refuted by God. I'm going to put it like that in the Bible. He can't, so I think that BLM, Antifa, all of these pseudo-Marxist organizations on the left, and then Islam, which I would put it, I don't even know if it's on that spectrum at all. It's somewhere lurking in the background, but out front somehow. They're both putting forward unreachable goals, and then Christianity has to be the one, or actually just Western society, because sometimes they're interchangeable, has to be the one to say, no, not really. But, okay, so let me just go back to my notes, because there was something the papal visit. What did you, well, I don't mind what you, I'm not the biggest fan of the guy in white, as it were, but what I do appreciate is his spotlight. I mean, he couldn't have found a place with fewer Christians, to be fair, but he did it anyway, and he's causing it to be spoken about, Christian persecution, which is very close to my heart. Not the persecution, the cessation. So what did you take away from his visit? Were you I don't know, what did you think about all of that?
Well, I'm glad that he is shedding a light on Christian persecution, but at the same time, he is assiduously denying and confusing people about the reasons why that persecution happened. And so I think it ends up being even worse, counterproductive, because he's actively misleading people into thinking that the cause of this persecution is other than what it is. And so they will apply the wrong solution and the persecution will go on. It's just like if you have one illness and you take a medicine for another, it's not going to cure you. So the Pope has years ago said authentic Islam and the proper reading of the Quran are opposed to every form of violence. That's just absolutely laughably false.
Abu Bakr's Quran.
Yeah,
maybe he's the guy who's got it. Maybe it was just a rough draft.
It's been in the Vatican this whole time. Of course, nobody looked there.
Yeah.
So he has repeatedly said that Islam is peaceful. He wanted Ayatollah Sistani to sign his human fraternity document that he developed with the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, Ahmed Al-Tayyib, and that document says that no religion teaches terrorism. Every religion teaches peace, and that it's only poverty that causes terrorism. Well, poverty doesn't cause terrorism. There have been some very wealthy terrorists. Osama bin Laden was very
I was
wealthy.
just thinking of him, funny enough, and
And those Glasgow physicians a few years back who drove their car into the airport, physicians are generally rather wealthy. And so, and of course, there are innumerable other examples. The idea, though, of claiming that poverty causes terrorism is just going to get, if people take him seriously, which unfortunately some people do, it's just going to get the West to shower money on various Islamic entities, which is not going to end jihad activity at all. And it may end up financing them, jihadis.
Yeah, I think that spiritual poverty could have easily been, I could make a case for it right now, like easily. The absence of any true spirituality means you're more than happy to strike terror into the hearts of whomever. But it's a little bit like, I don't want to say liberal because I always think of real liberals, but it's kind of like the theories that, you know, crime, the reasons for crime are all to do with a lack. Like, so you're just taking the food, you're just raping the woman, it's always because you don't have the thing that you want. But it doesn't, these theories don't take into account the lack that is then created in the person whose purse has just been stolen and virginity is just like whatever it is. And
because you don't matter.
Yeah.
In Islamic law, people don't realize, in Islamic law, the Muslim man is actually more valuable as a human being than other kinds of people. If there are elaborate rules for this. If you kill someone, you don't necessarily have to go to prison. You can pay the relatives of the deceased. And if it's a Muslim man, you have to pay a certain amount. If it's Christian, you have to pay less. If it's a woman, you pay less. If it's a Hindu, you pay even less, and so on. So there's the direct actual teaching is that Muslims' lives are more valuable than non-Muslims' lives. So, of course, they're going to behave as if they have a lack that they need to fulfill, and it doesn't matter what are your lacks or needs, because you're not as valuable as they are.
Yeah, I think it seems to me, I mean, in the Reliance of the Traveller, there's a page that I got an Arabic speaking friend of mine to translate. I wish I hadn't. It's so disgusting. And it's saying that there will be no punishment for these things because, I don't know, Ella felt like it or whatever it was. But the list of like deviant practices that can be gotten away with, as it were just like, I was thinking, why are you giving them ideas? These like people who like, surely it can't be from precedent. There can't have been a raft of cases trying these like quite imaginative crimes. I'm going to say like definitely mentally like just anyhow. I won't go into that. If anybody does, by the way, have any comment or question for Robert, now would be the time, I guess, to start typing. So one other thing I'd bring up, and I don't know, I guess there must be an equivalent in America. I can't think of it because some of the politicians, I can't look into them. I get so annoyed straight away that I just think, why? I've got my own to rail against. But very recently, I'm so saddened by it. I can't tell you how upset I was. Some LGBT, I don't know how many letters on the end, advisors quit their jobs and basically sashayed out of Parliament, I guess. The left of the House are all on board anyway. And they were pressuring Boris Johnson, who's the Prime Minister, to talk about conversion therapy. They're not talking about transgender conversion therapy. We're good to go with that. That's fine. But they're talking about people who do not want to be homosexual, have made that choice. No, I don't like this. I don't want to do this anymore or feel this way. And then I guess they go to some maybe clinic, retreat somewhere, and they're prayed for, and people fast and do purification and I guess psychological interventions, whatever it may be. But my own government, my Prime Minister has just described prayer as like torture, harmful. A lady called Angela Eagle, I'm going to assume her gender right off the bat. She said that it's it's like telling it's like a religious leader telling everyone you're all sinners. And I was like, yeah. I was thinking, where's the punchline? But that's her horror story, like, you know, that's something simple. But yeah, prayer and fasting in Lent, if you're not too shy, is when they come out with it, is like torture. So, I mean, that's news to me. Have you got any nutters in your government nowadays?
The question would be, are there any who aren't?
Well, they're probably hiding, to be fair. But yeah, has it completely fallen now that you've got the geriatric person running around?
Yeah, I don't see anybody there that I think, oh, it's a good thing that he or she is there, and they'll inject a note of sense. It's all deeply committed far left ideologues. They've never renounced the authoritarian statements that some of their some of the people that support them have made. Some of them quite influential. And so I think it's going to be very difficult times for the United States, for the freedom of speech, and I hope we survive as a free society, but it's going to be tough. Hey, can I answer that?
Sure. I just saw that.
Is Robert working on a new book? Yeah, I was hoping to get a chance to tell you, because I'm very excited about it. I'm just finishing up a book called The Critical Quran, which is the first critical Quran and the only critical Quran. And critical has several meanings. One of them is that it's not, you're not positive about it. And this is certainly true. This is, while many translations of the Quran will try to whitewash and obscure the violent passages, this translation, which is new, makes it very clear that where those passages are and what they exactly say. And the passages that have variants, because, you know, Muslims will say that the Quran is perfect, the Quran has never been changed, it's been miraculously preserved by Allah.
Of course.
I've got hundreds of variant readings from different manuscripts listed in this, and it is a translation, new translation of the Quran, plus commentary that shows what's dangerous about it and how it is the product of historical development, and there are variations, not just the monolith that Islamic apologists like to say that it is. And I hope that this is going to become the single reference for people who are dealing with Islam, trying to understand why it's so problematic, and maybe talk to Muslims. That will be out in November, and I'm looking forward very much to that.
I'm gonna, obviously you're gonna remember, make a mental note. I'm over here. I'm gonna buy that, please. I'll just, yeah, I did ask you before, I won't give you your exact answer, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say anywhere where they sell good books, like by default, that implies that they have robbers. 21 coming up 22. There's one in the birthing process. I don't know what you call it, like on the drawing board, as it were. So I'm going to put a few links for anyone who's got ethical issues with any providers, but a search engine and click on the shopping thing is also a thing to do, because then you can choose where you spend your hard-earned money. I did see another question that went past. Is Robert going to do any more like cameos? I did see Islam Says Me. It went past in inverted commas. I mean, it's difficult to do those if there are none being made, but
yeah, I actually saw that and I was puzzled, because that was a couple of years ago and it was finished. I didn't know. I actually haven't talked to David for a while, David Wood. So he may be doing new ones. I don't know. But if he is, he hasn't called me. If he is doing them, then tell him to call me. I'd be glad to be in it again.
I'm not sure that he is. I think people are just hopeful. I was going to ask, so after Jay's debate, there was a fair bit of, I know it was pretty put on, but so you haven't spoken to, like this, will you send him a copy of your book at least?
Oh, yeah, sure. I hope that he'll debate me about it. David and I have...
I don't even agree completely with either of you, but I'll
Well, we've
moderate.
always been good friends, he and I, for many years now. We debated about this issue when the first edition came out back in 2012. So I don't think that there's any personal animosity on this disagreement, but I hope that he'll discuss it again, and we can discuss some of the things that are new in the new edition.
Yeah, plus Jesus was pretty big on forgiveness anyway, so I doubt it. Like, just, I mean, it was one of his sort of catchphrasey things.
Yeah, I've heard this.
Okay. So, any specific questions? I asked about the papal visit, and we got through that pretty unscathed. Yeah, and I'm just looking through. I kind of just wanted to make a comment, I guess, as well. Back to the Marxist BLM Antifa slash whatever they're calling themselves this week. Like, it's a little, this cancel culture, this like having a YouTube channel banned a couple of hours before you're due to speak and all of that stuff. One, it pretty much it's like excommunication. It's the secular version of what the old Pope, you know, like 500 years ago, what he would do. And it has the ramifications. People are like untouchable in this sort of caste sense. So it's pretty bizarre because I wouldn't want to agree with everybody. I never would. I couldn't. It's just impossible for me. But I see the flaw in everything straight. That's one of my things. That's the critical part of my reading of the Quran all the time is I think that's nonsense. But do you find pushback like in your day-to-day life, or is it just when you're, you know, in a suit and tie on a TV show or on a, like when you're putting yourself out there, or do you get a pretty steady stream of, I mean, do people pay money for your books to critique them back to you, or is it more?
Well, certainly that happens.
Yeah.
It's sort of an ongoing thing. There was an Islamic apologist a year or so ago who did some videos on my book, The History of Jihad, and I was kind of happy actually to see, because I thought maybe we'll actually get some engagement with this material from a Muslim instead of just denial that it exists. But all he did, I watched a little bit of the first one, and he was taking issue with my quoting Muhammad saying, "I've been made victorious with terror," and saying all he means is the fear of God, like it says in the Bible. And so how can you say that this has anything to do with modern day terrorism, which of course in the first place I didn't say. I just quoted him. But also Muhammad himself engaged in warfare against unbelievers, and he did terrorize them, which makes it pretty clear that when he says I've been made victorious with terror, he doesn't just mean the fear of God.
Talking about
so the videos, in other words, they're ridiculous, and they're not worth dealing with because there's no real argument there. But you know, if anybody can actually refute what I say on the facts, I'd be happy to see it and have a discussion. I haven't seen it yet.
I have decided actually, I'm going to do like a short, not a short series, but a series of short videos on the basics of Christianity. Even I used to go with the presumption that most people who are interested in apologetics or polemics would have like a foundational, and even taking into account denominational stuff, because sometimes like I think, oh yeah, that's because those people believe that anyway. Some of it's pretty shocking, like that, because I'm on some social media where there are like debates pretty frequently. Some of the stuff, like I can be pretty horrified that people actually think that about, and they're Christians and they've just like kind of got stuff mixed up. So I'm going to do that, basics of Christianity. Have you ever like, is there a market for maybe just the basics of jihad, like how people are? How does anyone twist their mind into such a place without coercion? And like, how do you I know they're countering it, but maybe like bite size, I don't know, like, is that a thing?
Well, I've written a lot of books, and one of them was back in 2005, a book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, which I intended to be a basic introduction to what's difficult, what's problematic about Islam, why there's so much trouble between Muslims and non-Muslims, and so on. I hope that is a clear and easy basic introduction. That's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. It just now, I mean, I'm looking at my bookshelf and it's an indictment. I don't, unless they're on my phone nowadays, even just the reading part, it's too bulk. I'd be carrying around a small library with me. But I find that people of maybe my daughter's age or that, like young people, I used to walk around with a book in my hands instead of a phone. Everyone's got a phone. I always had a book, but even spelling's different nowadays, and like there's abbreviations and stuff. So okay, maybe I'll read the book and then I'll present the stuff to the youngsters.
Okay.
Right. We've been bunnying, as we say in England, for
I never heard that one.
Yeah, rabbiting. It means chit-chatting. No.
That's new to me altogether.
Right. I'm going to do a short series on Cockney rhyming slang as well.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, please do buy any or all in sequence, whatever, of Robert's books, because he's not doing it for fun. Like, he's spending all of this time putting out the information so that you can assimilate it into your massive amounts of knowledge on the topic anyway, and then polemicize until people just stop. While you're at it, please help me. Write to a Nigerian embassy, maybe ask them about, the missing girls. Like, yay, like 200 get out, but there are still 100 from more than 3 years ago. There are countless children who just go missing. In Pakistan, there are Christian girls, Hindu girls who are gunpoint in the street, broad daylight, taken. Their kidnappers then stand up in court and lie about their age as if that's the pertinent fact. Like, I would like it if everybody could just, well, at least in your prayers, like, focus on persecution. If the Pope can do it, come on, Protestants, we can all get involved. I find it difficult to say goodbye. Like, I always start rambling at the end of videos. Jay's just like, okay then. But yeah, I'm gonna in fact, if you stay in the studio, I will end the thing and then I'll be able to, like, chew your ear off for one more minute. But I'm going to say to everybody in the chat, Jihad, let me make sure I'm right. Hold on, it's here. Right, jihadwatch, all one word, .org. Do you have a YouTube channel? Do you?
Yes, I do. I haven't made a video in 100 years, but yeah, I have a YouTube channel.
Okay,
Jihad Watch.
That's it. And is there a TV or something like that in the time? I'll find the link.
Maybe there is. Jihad Watch video, I think it is.
Yeah, because I didn't know if it was you or not. Yeah, because that's one more thing I must mention before we go. Are you a machine? Like, in the sense of the prolific, like, how many Jihad Watch? I've got a webhook, so I get every single story you do. It pops up on my computer, and I'm like, how are you doing this? Because I can't even get one assignment for university done without. No, I'm a master procrastinator. But
well, this is all I do. That's it. So
do you? Well, it would be a blessing if you ever started to run out. I mean, let me know if the stories just dwindle. But yeah. Okay, so buy his books, go to his website, comment and like and subscribe all of his stuff. Look out for the November one, because I'm definitely getting that, and you'll be hearing a lot more from me so okay, we'll talk about it when it comes out. And I'm going to say God bless you and thank you very much for relentlessly reporting on Jihad, because if you weren't, like, there would only be maybe 2 other sources really, and it's pretty shocking that these things go on, and yet the whole of society, like, loses its mind if someone calls a he a she. Like, but yeah, macheteings and blowing people, that's all fine. So on that bombshell of subjective morality, I'm going to end the stream. That's what the young people call it. And I'm going to say I'll see you all for the scheduled lecture tomorrow. Thanks very much, Robert, for agreeing to listen to me waffle and answering the questions very well. And I'll see you all later. Bye-bye. Right. The